Meet the deadliest weapons used by Germany. Germany's military prowess has never been in doubt. If you've forgotten, World War II is your most excellent reminder. With tensions escalating in Ukraine, Germany is ready to aid Kyiv by sending in some of the country's deadliest weapons. Germany decided to reverse a historic policy that prevented the country from sending military weapons to conflict zones. The reason was that the country believed the Russian invasion imperiled Europe's post-World War order. Thus, in this video, let's take a look at Germany's deadliest weapons. However, before we get into all that, ensure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, Military Technology Updates. Germany's history as a powerful nation. The military might of Germany may not be revered as it was during World War II. Still, it remains a strong nation with deadly weapons. The weapons it fielded back in the day, some of which are still in service today, were some of the deadliest in any war. Thanks to its scientists, engineers, and modern mass production techniques, the German military is as formidable as it is. During the World War, Germany created new and highly mechanized warfare machines. The machines were faster and deadlier than most of the Allied forces had. They overwhelmed their enemies and helped the country subjugate the better part of Europe. Germany has not invested as much as the powerful countries such as Russia, the U.S., and China. However, the country still boasts an impressive list of weapons we'll be looking at in this video. The Panzer Kampfwagen 6, also known as Tiger Tank. This weapon's known as a super fast and hard-hitting war chariot. The German army used this tank in the early years of the Second World War. Interestingly, this weapon was originally an innovation of the British military. However, Germany's engineers took it to their logical conclusion with incredible upgrades and features. Most of Germany's tank forces are composed of tanks that are not as big as the Tiger tank. These smaller tanks are earlier versions of the tank model, such as the Panzer Kampfwagen 3 and 4. As a result, the Tiger tank plays a decisive role on the armored battlefield, precisely what it was built for. How big is this tank? Well, the Tiger tank is 54 tons, which means that it's more significant than contemporary tanks. Germany completed this machine back in 1942 with several features, including the KWK-36 gun and a thick armored hide. These two features alone made the Tiger tank one weapon the Allied forces disliked having to face. During the war, the tank's thick armored hide had the capacity to shrug off most of the anti-tank rounds available then. The Bf-109 fighter. Germany's Messerschmitt Bf-109 was regarded as the most lethal fighter during the Second World War. This potent aircraft was designed by the legendary designer Willy Messerschmitt. The man worked on the construction of the fighter back in the 1930s. Upon completion, it replaced several interwar German fighter jets. Part of its features include retraceable landing gear, a monocoque airframe, and a closed cockpit. The earliest Bf-109 models were actively used during the Spanish Civil War, and by the late 30s, Germany began complete rearmament. This rearmament made this fighter jet the primary weapon of Germany's fledgling Luftwaffe. The Bf-109 is maneuverable, fast, and hard-hitting as it features two 51 caliber heavy machine guns. The machine guns were accompanied by one 21mm cannon. The Bf-109A served all over North America, Europe, as well as European Russia. It dominated all the air forces except the Royal Air Force until 1943. Interestingly, a Bf-109 variant known as the Czech Avia 199 was part of an embryonic Israel Air Force back in the 1940s. The MG-42 machine gun. This deadly machine gun played a considerable role in the high death rate of World War I. Its original model, the MG-34, which was adopted in 1934, is lightweight. However, it had an extremely high rate of firepower, as much as 1,200 rounds per minute. It's also capable of quick barrel changes during combat, which is crucial for an infantry support weapon. Unfortunately, the MG-34 could not keep up with demand, which led to the creation of the MG-42 in 1942. The MG-42 had a simplified design which allowed for mass production. Reports reveal that about 400,000 of these machine guns were produced. Its high rate of firepower proved to be immensely beneficial in defensive battles. Panzerfaust anti-tank weapon. Germany's Panzerfaust is a straightforward yet effective anti-tank weapon. It's a recoilless, single-shot weapon that features a massive egg-shaped warhead attached to a metal tube. The trigger on the weapon ignites the black powder propellant and sends the warhead as far as 30 yards. The warhead could destroy most of the military tanks that were available then. This weapon was so effective that it made virtually anyone who wields it a potential tank killer. Allied tank crews learned to be more cautious around Germany's infantry in time. M270 Multiple Launch Rocket System. Unlike the weapons discussed earlier, this weapon was not in service in the First or Second World War. The M270 weapon is designed to move fire and relocate to reloading point. Once in firing position, it launches its rockets and immediately moves away to a safe reloading spot. Once reloaded, it moves again to another hiding position that's close to a new firing point. The M270 Scout and Scout tactic was structured to avoid being susceptible to Soviet counter-battery fire. An M270 that fires 12 M26 rockets would release over 7,000 bomblets. Also, an M270 battery that fires 108 rockets would unleash firepower equivalent to 33 battalions of cannon artillery. This incredibly destructive weapon system has the ability to fire rockets or missiles in interchangeable pods. A single launcher firing 12 rockets would totally blanket 1 square kilometers with submunitions. This is because each rocket contains over 600 M77 grenades. If the entire salvo is fired, over 23,000 grenades will be dropped in the target area. The M270 is a really dangerous weapon to wield in battle. Now, Germany has decided to send weapons to aid Ukraine. As stated earlier, Germany had a law that prevented it from sending weapons to regions in conflict. However, it has changed this law under pressure from the EU and NATO. The decision happened abruptly as Berlin clung to its initial position for weeks despite the rising Russian menace. Reports disclose that the Germans are ready to send as many as 500 Stinger anti-aircraft defense systems and 1,000 anti-tank weapons to Ukraine's aid. The German government has also told the Netherlands to aid Ukraine with 400 rocket-propelled grenade launchers. U.S.A. also received word from Berlin to ship over 9 howitzers. Olaf Scholz, a German chancellor, stated that the Russian invasion marked a turning point in Europe and threatened the continent's entire post-war order. This is believed to have spurred the country to support Ukraine in defending itself against Putin's invading army. Germany's change of rules and what it might lead to. Initially, Berlin had stuck to its long-standing practice of not offloading lethal weapons into conflict zones. This meant that the nation generally stayed out of wars in which it wasn't directly involved. Being a part of the European Union, this rule bewildered some European officials, and indeed they piled the pressure on Germany. This recent shift comes as multiple Western allies plan to send more guns and weapons to Ukraine. Many allied nations are mobilizing ammunition and even anti-aircraft defense systems. With Germany joining this aid, it could mean a rapid increase in military assistance sent to Ukraine. There's no denying that many of Europe's weapons are at least in part German manufactured. Thus, it gives the country some legal control over their transfer. Germany's change of heart does not necessarily mean all requests for arms will get approved. At the very least, each case will be decided individually. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, Military Technology Updates. Alright, let's get back to the video. Ukraine's cry for help. Before Germany's change of heart, many senior Ukrainian officials complained bitterly about Berlin's refusal to permit arms shipments that would bolster Ukraine's defenses. Estonia, for its part, said it wanted to supply some old howitzers but couldn't do so because Germany was withholding approval. Now that the weapons have been bought from Finland, Berlin's consent was also needed before the transfer could commence because it originally sold the howitzers to Finland. Ukrainian officials from EU countries were outraged at this. After enough pressure, Germany said it sent 5,000 helmets and a field hospital to Ukraine. This was of course considered a meager contribution considering that Berlin is the biggest and arguably wealthiest EU nation. With Germany's approval, other countries are now chipping in. After Germany's change of heart, Poland has already begun sending ammunition by land. Also, Latvia and Estonia said they sent medical supplies, truck fuel, and Javelin anti-armor weapons to the Ukraine border. There's also the Czech Republic revealing its plans to send ammunition and guns, while Slovakia intends to send diesel, ammunition, and kerosene. The Netherlands revealed plans to send 200 Stinger anti-aircraft defense systems. Ukraine's military officials would be pleased to hear this since it's the top requested type of military aid. Of course, that excludes Western powers who have sent their forces and planes to help in the war. Belgium announced it would supply Kyiv with 3,800 tons of fuel as well as 2,000 machine guns. Chief among all this is the aid coming from the United States. The country has reportedly authorized up to $350 million to support Ukraine's defense systems. This funding includes extra lethal defensive assistance too. It's worth noting that while NATO and the EU pressured Germany to change its rules, the nation defended its stance as part of a post-World War II policy. The policy was aimed at preventing bloodshed, and it clearly laid out the rules to avoid further catastrophes. However, the EU pointed out that Berlin's stance meant weapons stockpiled across the continent would not reach Ukraine. Although the military weapon laws are pretty complicated, manufacturing countries generally retain some legal authority over donations or reselling arms to third parties. This authority also applies to produce war machines jointly. A German official stated that it was incorrect to report that Berlin was purposely blocking anything since no further requests had been made. However, several countries disputed the claim. Regardless of Germany's earlier position, a senior official from Central Europe declared that the EU had to intervene. The senior official disclosed that it was time for people to rise and offer as much help as possible. The situation in Ukraine happens to be very dire as more people are reported dead, and there's likely more to come as the war continues. And now that Germany has decided to send some of her deadly weapons to Ukraine, no one can tell what can happen in Ukraine. As stated earlier, Germany's decision means other nations buying arms from her can send help too. All this might lead to further escalation of the war. If you enjoyed watching videos like this, then leave a like and ensure to subscribe to the channel Military Technology Updates. That way you don't miss out on our next videos. Alright, take care.